Okay, one of the things that probably has jumped out at you already is that we're missing the ability to assign a new user that maybe is just registered in the system to a given role, or perhaps somebody's got a promotion to a different job and we have to change what roles they're in. How do we do that in the system? Well, maybe let me back up for 1 second. Yeah, we use this seed approach to create our roles in the first place, right? For the most part, I rarely have to worry about adding roles, right? Usually you sit down with the client, you figure out what roles the overall security requirements call for. Okay, do you need, 5 different roles, 4 different roles, 10 roles, whatever, right? Worst I've ever actually seen was 8 in the real world. So you don't usually need a huge number of roles, and rarely would you ever change or add them, right? So basically, seeding them is good enough. Okay, we don't really have to worry about adding and removing roles dynamically by the end user. But moving people in and out of roles, yeah, that's a big deal. And of course, if you want to make a lot of money, you could say, okay, well, every time you need to do that, you just call me up and I'll charge you $120 an hour and I'll come and I'll do that for you or connect online and fix you up, right? Well, you won't have very happy clients if that's the kind of programmer you are. So we need to be able to give them the ability to do the things that they have to do on a regular basis, right? So how do you add user role management? Well, truth is, it's not built in. That's one of the things that's kind of missing from the identity system. However, do a quick search on the internet and you'll find a number of suggested solutions and things that people have worked out. Some people actually sell their ideas. Some people share them for free on GitHub and so on, right? And some of them are very complex, I have to be honest with you. So what I did here is at one point I had a bonus challenge for students in the past, and then of course I had to do a solution myself. So this is basically what I came up with. I kind of like it because looking at this approach reinforces a lot of the things that we've done already because there's really nothing new. We've learned about the user manager, right? And we've seen that we can use that to create users and add them to roles. Okay. So using that and the fact that when we looked at the tables, remember, it's a many-to-many relationship, users and roles, right? Well, we've done that before with checkboxes, so we're going to use the exact same approach here, right? So it really is not new. We're just taking techniques we've learned in the past and applying them to a new situation. So I have my copy paste code, so you can use it to follow along as well, right? Just notice here, the first thing we're going to do is add a couple more view models, okay? One to represent a user, okay, with their ID. Remember, it's going to be a string because, of course, in the identity system, all the IDs right now are set up as GUID strings, right? Username. And ideally, this is what we want. We want to have a nice list, an I list of strings of the names of all the roles that a user's in, right? And then, of course, for an individual role, well, this should look familiar. This is basically the setup we would normally use for a checkbox, right? The ID, the role name, and then a Boolean is are they assigned in this role or not, right? So these view models are going to be there necessary for us to actually carry out managing the users and then using checkboxes to add them or remove them out of different roles. Okay, so let me come over here. We have already our folder for view models, right? So I'll add a couple more then. We'll add a class for user view model. And we'll add one for our role view model, which is really just our intersection entity type thing, our checkbox, right? Okay, so I'll just get the properties in place here. Now I'm not worrying, of course, with checkboxes. I don't worry about annotations for display names or anything because all it is a checkbox, right? Okay, we will do a little bit of work with annotations here for the user view model because we will be scaffolding a controller, right? Okay, so I do need a using for data annotations. All right, so that's good. All we really need now is a controller, okay? So I'm going to add an actual empty controller, okay? because it's not based on any real models, right? It's going to be based on my user view model object. You can actually select it, but then it makes things actually more complicated in the end, right? So for the code for this, I just took bits and pieces from other ones and went ahead and did it. So uh, I'm going to call it uh, user roles as a name for the controller. Okay, public class user roles controller. Okay, so the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the annotation here that, hey, only admins should come here. Obviously, it should be an administrator who actually looks after assigning people to different roles, right? So that would be the first thing I might think about. Okay, now of course we're going to have, I could do it a bit at a time, but I'll probably mess up. So I'm going to get my entire controller code and we're going to put it in place and then we'll talk about it then. All right. Okay. All right. So coming up to the top, okay, application DB context, of course, that's in our data namespace. The user manager, right, is in ASP Net Core identity. Okay, so here's our constructor, right, for our controller. So we're going to grab our context from the bookshelf of dependency injection, and we'll grab our user manager as well, right? Oh, I have another one here for the view model, which is in our view models namespace. Okay. All right, so that's where we get our context and a user manager right here. They get injected with the constructor, and we're ready to go. So here's my index action, okay? So what I'm doing is I'm taking advantage. Oh, I do have another one. Entity Framework Core. Who'd have thought I would need that? Of course I do. Okay, so I'm just doing a link query, context.users, right? So in application DB context, we know that there is a DB set for users, right? And I can order it by username. And what I'm doing though is the user themselves, the identity users, got all kinds of things I don't need and don't want, right? So I'm just going to grab my new user view model objects. I'm going to use that to select into that type of object. And I just grab the properties that are appropriate, ID and username. Okay. Now, remember in our view model, the last thing was a collection of strings, an list of strings with the names of all the roles the user's in. But that's not in this table. So we're going to have to come back and get that later, right? Oh, I called this the wrong thing. That's what was bothering me. User roles controller, okay, but the class is called user roles. So I'll just change that. When I created it, I forgot the word controller. Okay, so now it matches. It was okay here because I copied and pasted it in. All right, sorry. Back to the index action. So I'm going to do the toList async right away. So it actually goes and gets all the users from the database. So now I have them in my own collection, right, of my view model objects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through for each one to find out what roles they're in. We're going to take advantage of this method that the user manager has, get roles, because guess what it does? It returns a list of strings on the names of all the roles. Woohoo! There you go. So basically, we just have to grab the user, right, from the actual system, and then we call this get roles, and that gives me my collection of roles. And that's it. I'm done. So my user view model objects are all ready to go. So I just return view users, right? We haven't made the view yet, but we'll do that next. Okay, just to finish our tour. Now, we'll never create a user, right? They log in or in some other way they're created. We don't do that in our controller. We're just basically editing, moving people in and out of roles, right? So here's our get for our edit, okay? And you see it's very much like a regular get, okay? We go find the user, uh, but we do it with the user manager, so we actually get the user as the identity role object, right? And when we go and get all the roles, right, for this one user, and then we Oh, look at this. Populate assigned user role data. In other words, we need to do our checkboxes, right? So if I just jump down, well, maybe I'll just peek definition. Okay, you see it's very much like our normal code we put for preparing checkboxes, right? And I just go through and I add all that to the view data so I can produce my checkboxes in the view. Okay, so the edit post, look at that, selected roles. Those are all my checkboxes coming in, as well as the ID of the user, right? That's a string. So again, we ask our user manager to go find the user, right, by the ID. And then what we basically are doing is we call our update user roles, right? So that, maybe I'll jump to this one, go to definition, right? So it's just further down. It's the same idea we've done before. Essentially, just we go through and we add all the roles, right? Add them or remove them depending on if they were in that role and now they're not, and vice versa. And if they haven't changed, then we don't change anything, right? So it's the same kind of code we've done before with the checkboxes. Okay, so that's basically it. All we do is we edit, right? And then we have our little helper utilities here, our populate and our update, and away we go. All right. Oh, just I do have a note in here. This next line of code, we actually have to go and when we get the identity roles, we need to actually produce this all roles uh, uh, list, okay, of identity roles. The reason for that is when we do a for each, okay, we'd actually get an error, right? If we didn't actually generate the list of roles first as an I list. But there's some documentation you can look up on that as well. All right, but basically, I've given you the code that you need to use, right? All right, so let's come down here. If I add some indexes, sorry, some views, add view. Actually, this isn't going to work this way anymore. It used to kind of work, but it just won't work out very well. So user roles, so I'll come down to the views folder, add a subfolder called user roles, right? And then I'll just add the views that I need here. So we'll add a view, okay? Just an empty view called index. Oh, there you go. All right. So it's not very different from our other indexes that we're used to using. Okay. The main thing I'll point out at the top here is our model, okay, for the view, our strongly typed view here, is a IEnumerable collection of our user view model objects, right? Other than that, it doesn't look very different. Model.username, model.user roles, right? So we show the name, we just have a for each loop to just list the names of all the roles. The action link, okay, just goes to edit, because that's the only action we have, is we're going to edit the user role assignments, right? So that's our index. Okay, I just need now our edit. So I'll right click, add another view for edit. Empty view. Okay. So this one, right? Similarly, it's a strongly typed view. The model is our user view model again, okay? But of course, it's not a collection, it's a single user view model, right? So we basically are just displaying the username, and for the user roles, right, we're doing our usual loop here, going through all the roles and creating a checkbox for each one, right? So the ones that are checked will be checked if they already are in a role, and vice versa if they aren't, right? So we can change them, submit, and of course our collection of selected roles, checkboxes, well, that's what came into our controller over here, right? So in the edit post, right, that's where we get our selected roles. Okay, so that's all there is to it. Okay, feel free to look at the code and walk through it yourself, but I'm just going to see it run here. So I'm going to come into shared, enter the layout, and we'll just add a link here for user role management, right? Maybe I'll throw in another div. Should probably start a new drop-down list soon, but okay. Okay. Controller is user roles. Action is index. Maybe I'll change that later, but that'll do for now. Okay. So, oh, I have a build error. What did I do? Probably in my copy and paste. Okay, so I have one too few curly braces. There we go. All right. Oh, I'm running instead of Control F5. Oh, well, that's okay. All right, so down at the bottom here, manage user roles. Oh, of course, I can't go there without being an admin, right? Well, I have to be logged in first, and then I can be an admin. So you can see that, okay, this is the current arrangement that we seeded, right? Now, if I want our super user, well, maybe I'll change the admin user. You notice I have it so you can't change this. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense. It has to be done through the actual security system. But I can just check off that they're also a supervisor. And you see that now this one user, admin1 at outlook.com, is in two roles at the same time, right? It's a many-to-many relationship. Okay, so user one, if I want to give them a role, I could do that. By the way, of course, you can just register, right? So if I register as David at outlook.com, see, that's where validation really comes in. Sorry, authenticating, where it sends you an email when you click a link back. It has to be a valid email in order to do that. Password, password, register. There we go. So now there's a new user in the system. Of course, if I try to go here, I get access denied. But if I log back in as admin again, come to our user roles, right? So there's our new user, not in any role. So guess what? David, he's a supervisor. There we go. And that's all there is. So now you can easily add people to roles, remove them from roles. And that's the most common thing that's sort of missing from identity that you need to be able to do.